Hey guys, I'm Genie here, aka Mustache Tom, here to review the video game Digimon Surive. So if you end up enjoying this full video game review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description, and one will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server, you can join, collab, and share your own content for free, and sharing will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Digimon Surive. So a little background on this game before we get into both the story and gameplay. So for those of you who don't know, when Digimon Surive was initially announced, there was a little bit of memeage around its release announcement, unfortunately, due to Metal Gear Survive, for those of you who may not remember this. A lot of people were joking about it, and then furthermore so, there are further conflicts when Digimon Surive seemed like it was going to keep getting delayed, which it was and was and was, and then it finally came out. So I decided to pick up this Digimon game as one of the resident Digimon fans. If you've been following my channel, I started my channel from Digimon, from playing one of the worst games, Digimon Masters Online, and have subsequently done some retrospective reviews recently, as of recently. So I've kind of come full circle in that regard. And Digimon's record in terms of games themselves has been quite interesting to see them go from Digimon Worlds series from 1 through 4 currently, with no sign of a 5 in any regards. But then we have Digimon Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory, which seems to be two separated games that are interconnected, and then a separate game in this in terms of Digimon Surive. This game uses the title in a more substantial way than the meme of it being compared to Metal Gear Survive, and let's take that time to properly segue right into the story. So yes, indeed, we do follow all of these tamers. You do see, you play the one in the middle-ish area that's sitting down next to the Agumon. This time around, in this particular story, these several kids end up being isekai'd away into the digital world while they're on a school trip. And upon getting to the digital world and meeting their Digimon, they're initially freaked out at first, and indeed, once that is overcome and they're trying to basically gauge what they have in terms of supplies, it literally does become about survival, as other wild Digimon are threats to the humans, as well as, well, that the unknown of if they're going to run out of supplies or anything of that nature, essentially. So it is good to see that the title is very indicative of, indeed, what this game was promising, and even its trailer seemed to indicate a much darker story than a lot of its predecessors, which, you know, they have done some of the more generic evil sort of storyline before. So this was kind of like a refreshing way in terms of just like tackling darker themes in regards to other things in terms of what the people or characters are going through. That immediately caught my attention from a story narrative based game with a tactical RPG game also attached to that game. These are two elements that something Digimon has never tackled before, at least to my memory. I don't remember any other tactical RPGs in terms of Digimon's, library. I know they have had some versus games like Digimon Rumble, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned before, they had some basic RPGs like the first 3 Digimon games, whereas Digimon 4 is more of an action RPG, so it definitely deviates even further. And Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory are also RPGs, but the narratives there are a little bit more substantiated from its predecessors of 1 through 3, and even 4 included in that. So it was interesting to see how the narrative here would be explained, and luckily so, that ends up being the case. I found, at least the first time around, that the narrative was pretty strong, and we get quite a collective group of characters to ride along. There are some characters that are dislikable, and there are characters that are likable. There's definitely a wide range of characters. Most people, from what I've gauged through either just looking at other people's, takes on the game, a lot of people do seem to not be fans of Ryu, that being the character with the Kunemon, and Lapmon, which is the character on the left there's Digimon. And his name is escaping my mind at the moment, so I do apologize if a lot of their names are just like escaping me currently. At any rate, despite that, they were among the lower tier characters, and the other tier of characters seemed to be of, speaking of the variety, Minato was sort of like your jokester character. We have the 2 siblings that are introduced. They have their heavy, like, brother-sister, like, baka whole thing going on. We have our young and innocent characters on the left-hand side, on our 2 ladies on the left there, who I also seem to imply in my own playthrough had seemed to have almost a more than platonic relationship growing potentially at the end, at like latter half of the game. So yeah, and that story definitely unfolds a lot more depending on which choices you make. So yes, in this game there are 3, and this is in line with the story, but also with the gameplay in terms of the narrative. In the narrative, there are 3 choices in which you can choose to go down: the Harmony route, the Wrathful route, and one other that is currently escaping me. Green, red, and yellow. And essentially, whichever points you've accumulated most based off your choices would lead you down a certain path. And this certain path would allow your Agumon to digivolve into different Digimon, as well as simultaneously veer the story in slightly different directions. This also includes who would survive in the literal sense, and yes, who would die. In this, the first playthrough, regardless of which path you choose, the 2 characters I already had mentioned, Ryu and Suji, his name just popped in my head just now, are immediately the 2 characters that will always die regardless of whichever path you choose. This is unavoidable, by the way. And I suppose after this is where I'll say spoiler alert for the rest of the story if you have not played it yet. Yes, I don't think that saying that first part is too much of a spoiler. I think since it's inevitable and unavoidable, I think that's okay to say without the spoiler warning. But from here on out, I will say spoiler warning just in case, if because this is a long game, and they do those two characters do die relatively early on in the game. Again, whereas to say I wouldn't consider that a spoiler. But again, based on your choices, some of the additional other characters can also die. That includes Miyu, and the two characters on the left, Oi, and I'm trying to remember the other one's name now. It's still escaping me. I'm sorry. Anyway, those two are also in a pair depending on which path you pick. I find this rather interesting, as it does keep the story rather refreshing, and it does allow for different slightly altercations in the story to take place. That being said, certain elements are definitely can be slightly altered after this first playthrough, and I'll get to that in just a bit. But for now, just know that in terms of the story, that yes, most of the characters can die. The only one who is immune to any of the deaths is Minoru and the main character. They are the only two pairs that are, that cannot die in terms of the canonized story. So there is that, and I'm not sure how much I like that. I think having a secondary character that also can't die is a little bit cheap in a way. There did seem to be a place in the story where you could have easily placed his death and it would have made sense. But, I guess they just wanted a consistent character to be with you, since you're sort of the generic, sort of hopeful character insert here. I don't know what their whole ordeal was with that, but I'm just guessing at this point. So I don't think it's too much of a negative in this regard. I just think it's a little bit of a notch against the game, as it were. Again, not too bad, but it could be better again. At any rate, moving right along, as I mentioned, once you beat the game successfully once, you can, in fact, save everyone in the game. This includes making certain decisions and using those choices to hard up certain individuals, the two I mentioned being Ryu and Suji, harding them up first, that being Ryu first, and then Suji to comply secondly after that, and in doing so you can indeed, upon a second save playthrough, save everyone in doing so in that order. And then picking a route that will also simultaneously help everyone help them not avoid getting got, as it were. So yes, there is all of that to also consider on top of the story. And I will also say, in terms of that, I do think the whole Digimon, trusting, or humans trusting the whole Digimon bit does come off a little bit weaker. Not substantially weaker, but just slightly ever so, when no character has been passed on. But I do get the general gist, is that it's technically, one of their Digimon, that being Lopamon, did technically still attack, but they were able to subvert that, it killing Suji in this regard, or him killing Suji in this regard, I should say specifically. But nonetheless, Ryu is the one who is able to be the one to wake up Suji, and I will say, in terms of the cutscene, I do think that they could have represented this a little bit better on as well, as a lot of the characters do sort of hang back as this is a lot of this is going on, and this awkward poise, standing still idly as things are happening is definitely something that I'm never a fan of. and there is a sense of fear that I could place under a certain amount of time, sure, but I do think that the time slot is very slightly abused in that particular scene for a long period of time, and Ryu's the only one seemingly that is able to avoid getting stuck in that sort of rut, stationary by fear or whatever it is. Nonetheless, the altercation does, as I mentioned, lead to the tamers distrusting the Digimon to a degree. This is more so notably noted in Minoru, and this would actually be the time and place, I would actually argue, would be the place and time where Minoru could potentially even die. So there is even that altercation that you could have added into the story that could have led to even that death. But as I mentioned, Minoru is perfectly safe, and Falcomon does just rejoin the party after quite a long kerfuffle of narrative and distrust and all of that. I will say some of the scenes are definitely long-winded for a narrative. One in particular that was quite noticeable, definitely on repeat, so I'm very fortunate that this game does include a skip button and slows down whenever a new piece of dialogue is added into the equation that might have not been there before due to your choices, and that being when you first enter the park and initiate a sequence in which you face off against these three rookie Digimon, that being Palmon, Patamon, and Biomon, consistently getting in your way and just bothering you, and the little goofy music plays, and the bit does go on. It does drag on for quite a long portion. So yes, the narrative of this game is vastly long. I believe there are 13 or 12 or 10 chapters. I know there's more than 10, regardless of which path you take, and then the ultimate route is they add an additional 3 chapters or so, or however many additional chapters for the ultimate, or, happy final true ending, as it were. Whereas each of those paths, as I mentioned earlier, Harmony, Wrath, and I still am misremembering the third one, but each one does alter the ending to a slightly different degree. Wrath probably being the worst of the endings, unless you count the ending of which your tamer and you choose to just leave. So there are 5 total endings. So there is the ending in which you and your tamer leave, which is probably the worst of the worst. Then there's the wrathful ending, which is still pretty awful. There's still war. There's still, bad. Harmony and the other path, I believe Harmony is green, and whatever the other path is yellow. But those 2 paths are kind of similar-ish in regards. I would probably say in terms of positive ending or positive outcome, the green ending is slightly more positive in terms of those regards, and if you want to rate them in terms of like how well off everyone is. And then there's the true ending, which is the best of the best, in which you even get a teaser for, I don't know, a sequel, question mark? Which you get a Demi Vmon, which is obviously, for those of you who don't know and may have never seen my channel, Digivolves into my favorite Digimon, being Vmon. So yes, there is that little bit at the end. At any rate, we do a bit of a time skip regardless. I believe it's 1 year passage of each ending. And just having that many endings definitely creates a replay value regardless, so that does boost up both the narrative and the gameplay, both respectively. And there are certainly definitely weak points in the story that I do feel like, with minor adjustments really, do feel like could be ironed out, or could have been ironed out to solidify Digimon Survive's story. But I cannot deny that the overwhelming narrative of this game is still overwhelmingly positive over negative. So I'm still going to give this game a 7 or even 8 out of 10 in terms of its story. I do think that its focus on that was well met, with the variety of characters and interactions and just the flow of everything. For the most part, it was pretty well done. I'm not one to complain if a story is long, as well, even if it's long-winded. Pacing it could have been an issue, and I do see how someone could point it out as an issue. For myself, I found myself, even in that bit where it was a little bit long-winded, was having a fun time with it. So that mileage may vary in terms of pacing regards, I suppose, so I am willing to submit that as part of one of the flaws, which would probably drop it to that 7, and even, that can definitely tackle it back down to that lower score. But anyway, getting to the gameplay, more so, there is the tactical RPG element, which is where our gameplay also resides in, outside of the choices. Here, the gameplay is, for the most part, a little bit more simplified. The tactical aspect isn't as heavy as the narrative aspect in this regard. I felt like they kept this relatively simple, and I don't think that's necessarily even a bad thing. I think that that's actually a positive in this regard. I think that a lot of people who may want to first try out their first tactical RPG, this would actually be one of my highest current recommendations for a tactical RPG, as I do feel like that welcoming, side of the simplicity of its gameplay is what can allow more people just to get into Digimon in general. And what's really great about that is that this game doesn't require you to play any other Digimon game or watch any other Digimon story, though I would suspect that a lot of Digimon fans were going to pick this up regardless. But I am talking to anyone who may never have been introduced to Digimon and may very well be perhaps more inclined to look at the tactical aspect of games and maybe be looking for something to jump in on that. So there is also that opportunity, and I'm always willing to stake something out if I do believe that it either deserves it, or it's something on top of it being something I just generally like seeing succeed, and that being the Digimon IP in general. So yeah, I'm gonna, promote this game regardless. And so yes, I do think that it is a relatively straightforward tactical RPG. You can move your Digimon, they have their turns, they can move up to a certain number of spaces within the blocks. Certain Digimon have more space to move, certain Digimon, when they digivolve, have more space from when they have their special attacks. So these are little minor things that you can look at and alter and keep track of. Again, they keep it relatively simple. And just as a added little thing, you can equip your Digimon with little items to help boost them even further along, to make your experience even easier than that. And to be fair, the game does offer some level of escalation. I will even go further and beyond with what I was just saying. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with the phrase level of escalation, that's as you progress through the game, how much more difficult the game becomes. And there was a point where I actually started to struggle in this game, so the level of escalation is there, it is present, and it does demand a little bit of paying attention to when that level of escalation starts to occur. So making sure your Digimon are equipped and recognizing how to do that, I do feel like the game gives you plenty of time to set that up, as well as figuring out how to capture newer Digimon. This is more so in the Persona realm of things if you've never played that. Each Digimon that is randomized in the field, or not necessarily randomized, but I mean more so, like they're randomized in sections, I guess is a better way of putting this. Regardless, once you face off against a Digimon, you can talk to them. In this, you get your four choices. Your four choices could either get the Digimon's likeness to go up or down once or even twice, depending on your answer, or again, it can go back down. And the higher the bar is, either they will just join you outright, or they will maybe be still inclined to join you, but that chance may be lowered depending on your, how well you did, and how much of the percentile is actually, high in terms of the Digimon. And the rookies in the beginning are of a naturally higher percentile, while the Digimon later on that are Digivolved have a naturally lower percentile, meaning you probably are more likely to achieve getting your Digimon earlier on and in their rookie forms and Digivolving them in various ways to get the outcome of the Digimon that are in the game. Speaking of, I will say the roster isn't too impressive this time around, and that is something that has been quite notable in previous Digimon entries, especially in Cybersleuth and Hacker's Memory, which probably has like double or even triple the amount of Digimon from this game. So I am a little bit disappointed in that regard. I do feel like, it is unfortunate, but I do kind of also simultaneously understand it to a degree, where it definitely comes across as they were way more focused on the narration and the writing aspect of this game, rather than, impressively having having an impressive roster, per se. So it's a minor complaint, if anything, if Digimon in the past has been known to have a very impressive roster. If that is something you are looking for in terms of if you are a fan of Digimon and you know how many Digimon there are currently, you may want to be looking for that impressive roster. So in that regard, this game might not be as much for that particular type of player, unfortunately. This is more, again, geared towards a heavier narrative and as well as a baby step into tactical RPG. So that's definitely the higher recommendations in terms of who should pick up Digimon Survive. I would still pick it up even with the lack of, and I did, with the knowing that the roster would not be as, heavy as some of the other games. I kind of felt that was going to be the case going in, and quite frankly, it didn't deter me that much or put me off in any way, as I was already impressed by, again, more so the narration and everything else that I already went over. So in terms of the gameplay, I'm actually going to give it a relatively high score. I do believe its gameplay is extremely strong. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9 out of 10. Really, really just excellent form in terms of its gameplay. There are very minor things that I would say in terms of quality of life that you could definitely add to make it that 10 out of 10. One thing I did point out in terms of the turn order, I would still say having the blue and the red on the right hand side when you can see the turn order is something that would help indicate, especially if you have a same Digimon as a monster that you're facing off against, would help in that regard. And just, an additional little, like, hey, this is your Digimon, stuff like that. Very minor changes, and maybe like a few minor adjustments in the story. But other than that, I will say I did thoroughly enjoy Digimon Survive. I do think that it is definitely one of the better games that have come out of Digimon's history. It's right up there with Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory, which I definitely scored. If I didn't score those two that high, I would have definitely should have if I didn't back in the day. But that's, whatever. Anyway, if you ended up enjoying this full review for Digimon Survive, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over by petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server, you can join, collab, and chill and do all that cool stuff. And then until next time, everyone, bye-bye.